Today, we're really excited to bring you some really innovative thinkers and approaches to higher education supports for home-based childcare educators whose primary language is other than English. And this is picking up on the session we did in November, and we will have a part 3 to this, which we'll talk about as we get a little further on. So today we're going to welcome you. We're going to touch base on our core beliefs, which are the guiding principles we use to ground all of our efforts for home-based childcare. And we're going to discuss credential verification, higher education supports, and get to those next steps. Right now, we're going to pause just to take a quick temperature check to see who is here today. Get to the right poll. And you can choose as many of these as fit, and we'll continue to let others in. We have a lot of information for you all today, so we're going to encourage you to put your questions in the chat. We'll try and answer them as we move along. If we don't get to your question, we will capture them and make sure that we provide them to our topical experts, and they can give us the answers, and we'll feed those back to you. We're going to go ahead and end this poll. It seems that let's share out the results. We have a number of individuals from support organizations, and then next biggest category is systems administrators. And we're really happy to have home-based childcare educators with us as well, and advocates, as we see in the chat. Today, we're talking about the supports that we have available to us. And just to help us kind of think about and get in the right state of mind for this conversation, we have this poll looking at what linguistic supports exist in your community that you know of and that you're familiar with. And as we're waiting for a few more responses, we're about halfway there. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeanna to discuss with us and remind us of the core beliefs.
Sure. Thanks, Danielle. Welcome, everyone. Great to see everyone. It feels like it's been a while since we've had one of our national webinars, but we're really thrilled to be able to pick up on part 2 and focus in more deeply on dual language learners and supports for how family childcare is part of the system that's really meeting the needs of families who their home language may be other than English. So as part of our core beliefs, which we'll take it to the next slide, we always do a little bit of grounding on this as thinking about from a systems perspective. So that's one of the unique things about the Build Initiative is it's really, while we work on many discrete issue areas, we are always sort of tying it back to how are we having system level responses to those issue areas so that we don't sort of just do one really great thing and then it may go away in a couple of years, but we really have that inform and change how the system functions. And our core beliefs really come from that and are based on that same sort of idea. And what we like to do is when we check in on the core beliefs, share them out and sort of ground everyone in the concepts of the core beliefs, and then also highlight which of the possibly maybe more than one of the core beliefs today's content is going to sort of drill us a little bit deeper on. But I mean, one of the starting just up at the top in the upper left corner, you see that this concept of family childcare and family friend and neighbor care settings as being part of the fabric of the early care and education delivery system. It's always one of the most important things that we sort of ground everything from. And another way to think of core beliefs is that they also are your guiding principles. So if you're doing something as a system or how you're building part of your childcare system doesn't hold that family childcare and FFN settings are part of the fabric of how you do mixed delivery, then you really need to pause and think about how are you just thinking that making decisions for centers and then applying those to family childcare settings, and then that's not them sort of as really truly authentically part of driving that decision making. That then speaks to number 2, when we think about the strategies and the system components and what we do, that we're always striving towards resourcing on par with the other settings that exist within that mixed delivery system, and that we truly use an understanding of what those costs are, whether it's the direct service costs or the types of quality and infrastructure supports that family, friend, and neighbor and family childcare settings need, that we really are resourcing those at the level that they need to be to achieve the North Star that we're trying to achieve within our states and communities. We're going to get into with 3 and a little bit into 4, but definitely with 3, today's content is going to help us to really think more about this particular core belief, this idea of family childcare settings and the strategies and the support structures, and which many of you represent those entities, are really being driven by what it is that family childcare settings need from the support. And if it is English is not the home language, then how are we meeting that? And how are we really embedding that within the culture that we use as a system, and then carrying it through to the types of supports. And so the examples from starting with the registry example all the way then talking to the higher education example sort of reflect that sort of meeting of needs, responsive to the provider's needs, as well as intentionality in the development of the support that's responsive to those settings versus, again, something that's created for centers and then tries to be applied to family childcare just is a disconnect that we often find. And so we're really going to bring you some examples that are coming from a place of meeting the provider community that is home-based childcare settings. And then, of course, thinking about how we're leveraging other funding is what comes in with core belief number 4, and how we really are finding ways to leverage those funding streams, but in a way that continues to be responsive to and best practice for the home-based childcare settings, which we use that term somewhat to be inclusive of family childcare and FFN. So you hear Danielle and I in particular move in and out of different ways to refer to it, trying to be inclusive and trying to demonstrate that many states have different terms that they use, and we want to be inclusive of all of you in all of the different contexts that you're in. So that's going to get us right to starting with our first speaker. We have a lot of content today, so we're going to jump right in, and we're going to start with Tiffany Blumhorst. And Tiffany is going to talk to us a little bit. We're kind of getting very much into like very detailed implementation with the credentialing example that Tiffany is going to bring us. And then we're going to move out to more of the sort of higher ed examples that are maybe broad-based in their reach. And so we just want to acknowledge that there is different roles that each of these examples fill, and we hope that you'll be able to use the chat, put questions out there. The speaker probably won't refer to them or answer the questions while they're speaking, but they're going to then try to answer some of the questions throughout the rest of the session, because there's such great different examples and they bring different strengths and responsiveness to family childcare providers to the table, that we acknowledge that you may have lots of additional information that you want to gather from our speakers as well. So don't hesitate to use the chat. And like Danielle said, we'll continue to connect you with the resources and do follow-up after the fact as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany to kick us off.
Hi guys. As she said, my name is Tiffany Blumhorst. I am with Ohio Child Care Resource and Referral Association, otherwise known as OCRA. And a subset of our agency here at OCRA is called the Ohio Professional Registry. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about one of the processes that we have implemented within the Ohio Professional Registry here at OCRA. It's international education evaluations is what we do here at the registry. This is actually one of the many options that we feature here, but this was something that we implemented back in 2019. So July 25th of 2019 was when we started this. And essentially what the professional registry is here in Ohio is we verify education, credentials, and professional development for professionals in Ohio participating in QRIS, which is called Step Up to Quality here in Ohio. And one of the things that we quickly noticed was there are barriers to getting education verified and participating fully in our QRIS requirements in our programs. I was a former center administrator, so I actually got to see this firsthand when I had lots of professionals that worked for me that were qualifying education-wise, but they had credentials that were completed outside of the United States. And unless if you have connections or you're well-funded, most folks have a hard time or a challenging time getting those verified in a very structured, packaged box of the registry. And we needed to come up with some ways to acknowledge the fact that educational achievements could be obtained outside of the United States. And quickly, a very long process ensued. Actually, it was actually a very long process in a short time frame. But in July 25th of 2019, we processed our first international education evaluation. And what we did essentially was we are providing what they call international education evaluation reports. These are free of charge to the professionals within the Ohio Professional Registry, and it's only good in our registry system. It's not accepted from outside sources, and the application process was actually fully embedded into the Ohio Professional Registry. So it's one of the applications that we process on a daily basis within 30-day time frame. We get quite a bit. You'll see at the end we have some data. So essentially, to stand this project up, we had to create some resources. We went to several conferences. We did a couple pre-conference sessions. That's how we gathered a lot of this information. But we currently have a subscription to AcroEdge, which is the platform that we utilize most. It is a paid service that we do participate in, but it is a service that will essentially provide all educational records or a history of the education structure for that country. And it will actually give you equivalency. So if you're looking at a document, it'll give you the title of that document in their native language, and it'll give you equivalency to the US standard of education. And that's the website that we use most often. There are lots of other resources that are listed here. You're probably all very familiar with WES, which is the World Evaluation Services. And so they actually, this is what they do. And if you've ever went down that route where someone had to utilize WES, you know that it's very costly. They actually do the same thing that we do here at the registry, but they charge $150 plus for those services. And you know, they have a more robust system, obviously, but they have tons of free resources on their website. We have actually made the standard that whatever documents WES requires is the same documents that we require. So professionals have to upload the same documentation to us that they would any kind of third-party evaluation system. So they have to upload those materials, and we review them using the standards on AcroEdge. Another resource that we use is IERF, which is a website that we utilize. We also use NAFSA. That's the organization that did the large conference that we went to. They hold those conferences yearly. And they have 2 published resources that we utilize for older. So as you can think, or as you can imagine, this process can get very murky, especially when you're dealing with education that's been completed, 20, 30 some years ago. There were actually books that were published. And so I've listed those 2 titles here, all the way back, to 1980s and such, that list the education credentials for those different countries. So what we've done is we've compiled a lot of that information. We've compiled a lot of the documents that have been uploaded into our registry already. And we have created these country profiles, is what we're calling them. So we can go into our SharePoint files and we can select any country, and we can see all the resources that we've collected on that country specifically. And that's how we process in-house evaluation. So we see a lot of third-party evaluations come through, and we still accept those. But these are for folks who, maybe not necessarily can't afford those, or they don't want to go through that process. We've seen a lot of people come to us first. We do offer, so this is a sample evaluation report that we use. On the left is the International Education Evaluation Report. And so this is what we provide to the professional when we actually review their documentation. So this is the blank form and what it looks like. We just collect some of the specific data. And then we're able to give US equivalency information and all the details here, so they have something that's been attached to their education achievements in their profile. And then on the right here, you can see this is kind of what we use. We use a benchmarking system. So this is kind of the platform that we utilize when we're looking at education. It's what most of the larger organizations utilize as well when they're providing that information. So I have some data on the next slide for you guys. Currently, as it stood on February 15th, we assisted 162 professionals get high school or equivalent verified. We assisted 179 professionals get their college verified. So it's a total of 341 professionals in the state of Ohio who likely would have to pay a minimum of at least $150 to get their credentials evaluated. Now, some of those people have submitted multiple education achievements. So these are just individual professionals. Each of those people could have a high school, they could have a bachelor's, they could have a master's, a doctorate. We do all of the education systems. So we actually, 341 seems like a small number in amount of time, but those are actually then folks who can be used in the quality rating system here. So those are teachers that we may have lost to other industries if we weren't able to get them into the system. We do have some areas of growth that we've already identified that we know about, and those are listed on the next slide. We do need to continue. This is a process where we need to continue expanding our educational knowledge. These systems are ever changing. We constantly are getting information from different countries. Things are being updated. So we're constantly having to make sure that we're reviewing the most current information and accurate information for each educational system, because they do change pretty often. And then we also need to provide more of a robust translation services for applicants. Currently, right now, our application is only offered in English. We have identified, we know that that is an issue, but we do know that 341 professionals were able to get assistance from their local resource and referral if they needed it. Friends and family, they were able to contact us. They were, able to go to translation services. So we know that folks were able to get through the process. Obviously, we provide any kind of resources that we can provide to folks, but we definitely, we know that that's an area where we need to provide more opportunity for growth for translation. So maybe having the application available in different languages, but currently right now it's in English. So that's kind of the platform that we utilized. We're very excited to have it. We're the only registry in the country currently to have this. It's been quite the conversation among other registries. So I would not, in the states that you're in, if you're in early childhood, you definitely will not, you'll probably hear about this from other systems as well, because there are lots of people who are interested in doing this and getting that information out to folks. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and I will be more than happy to take a look at those for you.
Great. And as we think about that, and thank you, Tiffany, so much for that presentation. And I know that's a super high level overview and you're going to have lots of questions. And we're here, and like we said at the outset, Jeanna and I are happy to connect you with Tiffany, or maybe host a call where with any of the speakers today, where we investigate some of the other questions. There are a couple of questions. If we can take just a moment, can you confirm the evaluations are only accepted for QRAS and not by higher ed institutions? Is that?
That's true, yes. So yeah, the most of our higher ed institutions will review that information, especially the high school level. A lot of them will do that. But yeah, no, I am not aware of any higher education systems in Ohio that are utilizing our evaluation platforms.
It's there are a couple of states that are mentioning that they have registries as well, like California. The question, are there extra expenses you've had to plan for this registry approach, and how have you funded those?
Yeah, so initially this started out as a pay for fee service. So we actually were charging $50, which was still way less than the standard for the evaluations. And once we were able to show that there was a need, our state actually decided to pick up that funding into the general revenue fund. And so they're paying for it that way. They have incorporated those costs, and that's why we're able to do it free for our professionals in the state. But yeah, it was initially we were charging. There was not many that kind of went that route at first, and then when we opened it up to the free option, obviously we saw more that came through.
So one thing to note, and what's exciting about this opportunity that Tiffany is raising, is that a lot of states have registries. Probably, I mean, off the top of my head, probably at least 70% of you do. And I know I work with a couple of states who are adding a registry in the next year. So the part of what we're talking about is this, how you go about it. Not all registries, and to Tiffany's point, Ohio is the only one currently that have this sort of articulation, for lack of a better term, from so individuals that are coming from other countries with documentation of their education can flow into the registry, right? Whereas right now in most states, it's really very limited to if you've achieved those things within the typical in-state or in the country systems, that's how you're able to track your information in the registry. So that's what, so the states that have a registry, you can be looking at how could I add this, right? And that may be something that Tiffany could even speak to, sort of how, a little bit about what that process looks like to be able to add this into how the registry functions.
Yeah, we've had lots of conversations. We have this organization called the National Workforce Registry Alliance, NWRA, that we have been working diligently with. We just did a peer learning community. I believe there was almost 18 different states recognized on that call. So it is definitely something that your registry, if they haven't already heard about it, we've been doing presentations at a lot of those conferences. So if they haven't already heard about it, they certainly will soon. But again, it's going to be one of those, where can you find the funding? Because you do have to have the training. So our staff actually had to fly out to Virginia and do some initial credentialing training held by the West staff. So all of that, obviously there's a cost for all of that. We did kind of stand up and say that, it was going to be a $10,000 annual kind of fee to this to kind of continue our training. But what we're finding is that once we figured out kind of the process of how to do it, the resources really were all we needed to continue to do it. So moving forward, though, if there's new things and we need to go back to conferences or gather as a group, we can do that. But at this point, the Acro Edge platform and utilizing WES and all those free services have really helped us.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. We're really grateful to have you with us today because we know you have a short amount of time today and really appreciate you being here. We'd like to encourage you, there are some questions in the chat. Go ahead and keep sending them. If you highlight that they're for the registry or for Tiffany, we'll make sure that once she leaves, we can forward those on. So with that, we want to go to the next slide. And we're going to present two different approaches to higher education for individuals and educators, home-based childcare educators whose first language and primary language may be other than English. And they're going to have some things in common, and you're going to notice some noticeable differences. And it's important to note that there's not a one-size-fits-all to any of the situations or challenges that we all face. So we wanted to highlight these because both of them are informed by the community response, community need. They're connecting with their communities to get that information and being accountable, and provide examples of how to think and approach higher education and workforce development in a different way that's culturally and linguistically responsive. So with that, we are really pleased to introduce Dr. Sonia Pruneda-Hernandez from Montgomery College, Maryland. Dr. Sonia?
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. So the first slide. So one of the things that we have really been looking at Montgomery College, and this has been a process, is really what is a community college? We are part of that community. And how do we support the diverse early childhood educators in the field? So I do want to say that this has been extensive work. It's not just the credit side. This is our non-credit side, what we call workforce development and continuing education. It has been extensive collaboration with my colleagues on the non-credit, on the credit, and also a lot of my research went into this. I started as a family childcare provider and then went into center-based and then ended up teaching at a community college and slowly getting my CDA, the associates, bachelor's, master's, and finally completing that doctoral with a concentration in higher ed and early childhood, really focused on childcare providers and their pathways in higher ed. So this has been extensive work. We've been working on this probably since 2015. And our focus was really looking at community colleges and what do we have to offer? How can we support these diverse communities? We need to really look at where do these early childhood providers start, especially family childcare. They don't start on the credit side. Many of them start on our non-credit side, really looking at what are the processes that we need to put in place to eliminate all these barriers that are in higher ed. So our program has degrees, and most community colleges, this is what we do. We have an AAT, which is an automatic transfer, an AAS, which is an applied science limited transfer. This is for an early childhood person to go to work. We have our workforce development that was doing the CDA training, but they also do others. They do non-credit math, they do English language for non-native speakers of English. So they have a lot of components. And until recently, our credit and our non-credit side did not work together or collaborate lots. In 2018, there was a lot of changes. We collaborated together with our non-credit side to really create a pathway, regardless of where a student was going to start, regardless of your language. We want to get you on a pathway. If you want to finish the CDA, great. If you want to do a 1 year, an AAS or an AAT, then great. We have the pathway for entry and exit. The very first thing that we found out is that a very large number of our workforce in childcare, both center-based and family childcare, were what we call ELL, English language learners. They were not coming into college on the credit side. You know, these degrees are being pushed. How do you get there if my language is not there? Something important also is Montgomery College. I live in Rockville, Maryland, Montgomery County. We are named, our community college is named the most diverse in the United States, in the continental United States. We are the most diverse, have the most languages, people from most countries at our college. And as per the data, we were also looking at a lot of our ELL trying to come in. There's an English placement exam. They were not passing it, so they were stuck. Let me do the CDA, but I can't go further. What we also found that was a barrier was funding. You can get funding on the credit side. You can't get funding on the non-credit side. If you need ESL, if you need the CDA classes, there's usually not scholarships for that. And then this was one of our major barriers, is we found that our early childhood educators, regardless of where they started, were taking 10 or more years to complete a 2-year degree. That was a huge problem, is why are they taking so long? And this is not just us. I've worked nationally with other community colleges. It is 10 to 15 years that it may take a childcare provider to actually complete a 2-year degree. So when we're saying you need these 4-year degrees, how long will that take? So we did a lot of work in collaboration. We developed a pathway. We wanted to ensure that childcare providers could come in regardless of where they are at. This pathway was created to actually get certificates or the CDA certificate and degree, and they're almost like stepping stones. So at the same time that we put them in to do a CDA, they may be doing ESL classes. We are there supporting them. They may also be doing non-credit math because many do not place into our math. So we created this pathway of them. Instead of taking a bunch of math classes, there is actually now one course that they could do on our non-credit side and transition if they pass to our credit side. The CDA was a huge barrier. A lot of students, we had a lot of feedback. I've done all this work, I'm not getting credit. I've done all this work, what was it good for? So in 2017, we actually implemented with the college's approval and support that any person that completed the CDA, we automatically give them 6 college credits. And that goes towards their early childhood degree, actual class credits that they are receiving. And this is at no cost to the student. So you complete your CDA, you verify it with the college, we're going to give you college credit for EDUC 115, Health, Safety, and Nutrition, and the Intro to Early Childhood Education, which are courses that lead to the degree. And another thing that we did was ensured that there was a halfway point. So our students are completing that CDA, then they go towards a 1-year certificate. They actually graduate with that. It is at the 30 credit mark, and then they go on with the AAS. One of the issues was when we saw that they were taking 10 years, how can we actually get them certificates, credentials that are going to be valuable in the workplace? And I want to also state that this was a lot of work. The brainstorming also happened. We organized what we call the Workforce Advisory Council for Montgomery College. These are national and state and county people from the actual workforce. We meet quarterly, we get input from them, we send them out emails like they all received about today. And so we wanted to ensure that we were getting feedback. And again, this is always in collaboration with our workforce development and other entities. We've even brought in, now we have a lab school at the college and we've brought them in as well. So all early childhood is working together at the college to support the childcare providers or early childhood educators, regardless of where they at. The pathways we needed to ensure that didn't just include the CDA internship, which we're working on, 1-year certificate in the AS, but also that we were working collaboratively with our other departments, the English, what we call our ESL language, our non-credit math, and then internship, the practicums that our students have to complete. So this was real collaboration across not just credit, but non-credit and all different departments. So many of our students currently are taking courses. They may be doing the CDA, but they're also taking ESL classes at the same time, or they may be in the non-credit math. So, and creating this pathway, it is a seamless. So we want to ensure that it is seamless, but the other big barrier was who's going to pay for this? They are childcare providers, family childcare providers. They don't have those extra funds to pay $500 for a class in one semester. So one of the things that we actually did, this is again in collaboration. There is a fund in Maryland. It is called the Child Care Development Fund, Child Care Provider Child Development Fund, CCPDF, I always know it as. And so in working and going to Maryland State Department of Education Office of Child Care was if we have created a full documented pathway will you cover the funds if the ESL and non-credit math classes are part of it? And they came back and said yes. But this also takes work, a lot of work on the college side, because what that means is we have to actually show verification that they have a documented pathway. Every single student must have an academic plan. And in those academic plans, we have to add those non-credit classes for them to be paid. So our state actually approved that for our college. So we have many of those students that were part of the CCPDF. In addition, just a couple of years ago, our county also started an initiative called the Early Care and Education Initiative. That initiative also, we wanted to ensure that these courses were covered as a documented pathway. So regardless if they are our county on that scholarship, what we call the ECI, or with our state, the CCPDF, regardless of where you come in, whether it's ESL or credit or non-credit math, those courses are covered because it is part of your pathway. That was one of the biggest barriers that we found, is that students were saying, we do not have the funds to pay for, I have to take 2 ESL courses before I get to credit, or I have to do this. And so that has been a big support. We really wanted to promote and market this collaboratively. The work has been extensive with our continuing education or workforce development and continuing education. We ourselves, my colleague Nelly Andres, from the workforce development and continuing education, we do a lot of our own marketing, going and doing outreach, going to conferences, ensuring that we are there and showing that there is a pathway from the non-credit to credit. There is support regardless of where you are. We're going to eliminate those barriers if we can. So along with eliminating the barriers, the CDA was one of our biggest components of giving credit. And the concern from our childcare provider community was, so you're going to give me credit, but you're going to charge me that 6 credits. If that's over $1,000, I would have to pay. And the college came back and said, no, we will not charge them for that. So that actually took effect January 27, 2018, is that we give the 6 college credit regardless of where they are at. What we also have found as our program started growing is that we needed a support system. It used to be Nelly and I doing everything together, supporting these students, but that's okay when you have 20 students, 30 students. When you have over 200, there are some issues. And so this was going back to the college and saying, I need support, I need some adjuncts, we need a support system. And so what we have put in place is specific early childhood faculty, our adjuncts, as academic advisors. These are actual directors. They may be family childcare providers. I have 2 of them who have finished masters. They are now our adjuncts, have been through our programs maybe. They actually know what it's like, but now we've trained them also as academic advisors. They may also teach our classes. And so they are part of our academic support system. They are the ones, we have currently 4 of them in place. They are the ones that connect with the students, whether it's evening and weekend. And that was the other thing. We cannot be an 8 to 5 college or an 8 to 5 program because our providers are evening, weekends. That's when they have the time. So our academic advisors actually do a lot of the work during evening, Saturday hours to ensure students have these academic supports in place or academic advising plans in place, meeting with them one-on-one. We also have what's called the Early Childhood Education Student Success Hub. That is a mouthful. That used to be called the ECE Club. It started with 5 people and myself that they actually dragged in 2008. We now have over, I think the last count was over 200. We have 2 academic advisors. I'm no longer there. And it has switched. It's no longer a club. It is literally a success hub. They meet on Friday night from 7 to 9, but they are learning about all these different academic supports. So the last meeting that they actually had was one of our IT specialists coming in, showing how to do the PowerPoints, knowing what is free. The students have all these free because they're at our college. If they have an MC email, they have PowerPoint, they have all these different resources that they did not know about. So we bring in different supports so that they are aware of. And so that's what that hub has turned into. And again, that is open to credit and non-credit. We never want to leave our non-credit students and our non-credit faculty directors out. They are a critical part of supporting our students and supporting the students to actually complete a pathway. it's great that they start, but we actually want to see them complete. We have a lot of EC faculty advisors. Besides our academic advisors, we have faculty advisors that actually have worked on the credit and taught on the non-credit side, so also support systems. And recently we brought in our CE Lab School so that we are all working together. The CE Lab School actually is now going what is called high flex in education, meaning that you no longer have to come to the lab school to do your actual observations because of the technology. They can be anywhere and log in and are seeing everything in the classroom. So that's actually the center is being right now being worked on to have that high flex system put in. So this is, I did want to show, I'm very proud of our students. It's kind of like a mom because I started this in 2008. Our actual student that started the club was an 84-year-old woman that was determined to get her degree. And so this club started and it kept evolving, growing. Our non-credit side came on board. Their director became one of the advisors, and now we have 2 additional advisors because it's grown so large. You will see the differences. They've actually won many awards for the extensive work. These students, we actually support them. They lead these, they help decide what do they need, what resources do they need to know about to be successful in college. So we have a group, an advisory group that actually leads with the president of students. They are all, majority are childcare providers. In addition, we do celebrations when they graduate, but they also do a lot of community events. They gave out over 3,000 new books to our community. We go to a place called Wheaton. They also do the Gaithersburg Book Festival and do events. And this is in connection with our state. There's a requirement for professional activity units. We ensure that all those events also count as part of this credentialing system for activity units. And the state has been very supportive of all the work that we have been doing and supporting our students to ensure that they are also moving up in that credentialing and that the work they do counts. So eliminating the barriers, we kept working on this. We continue to see that there are barriers. One of the big things that we did prior to COVID and prior to everybody going remote and virtual, we were already fully online. We had found that that was one of the biggest supports for our student, not only fully online, we were doing what we called, we didn't call it remote virtual. That's what they called at COVID. We called it live. So we actually have online classes, but a faculty would be on every week, once at night or on Saturday morning to support those students with the classes that were online. So we used to use what's called Go Teams. Now everybody's using Zoom. And so once COVID hit, the college looked at early childhood and said, what were you guys doing? And how did you do it? Because it seems like you guys already had this in place. And we did. And that was to ensure that all our childcare providers could actually attend college regardless of where they were at. We've also put other systems in place, virtual tutoring. Our MC libraries have opened up. And I do want to say that our enrollment has increased by over 200 within a 2-year period. And then the next slide, I know that I'm almost done. So I want to do one more slide. This is our exit and entry points, students coming in and out. And the next slide, I wanted to show the data. So this is, how has the data changed in the past 5 years? In the past 5 years, we have reduced the time to completion with the online with actually extensive non-credit to credit. From 10 years, we have gone down to 3.5 years. Most of our childcare providers with this extensive support and the systems put in place are actually graduating in 3.5 years to 4 years. That is with the AAS, that doesn't include the CDA, the 1 year. In May 2021, we were so excited. We had over 60 early childhood educators graduate with either the 1 year AAS or AAT. That does not include our CDA holders. We have another number for CDA holders, but these were the actual graduates, the data that I had for them. That was historic for our college for early childhood. And then this December, we actually just graduated 20, and we were so excited. December 19th, 2021, another 20 graduated. We are anticipating another 20 graduating in May, and then an additional 20 graduating in August, because we have summer graduation as well. And so the data has been extensive. It has changed. The the big thing is really implementing and working with our workforce development, working in collaboration with other departments. What we actually had called this not pathway, we used to call it the one college model. This is no longer, hey, we're these silos. We are a one college model. We're all supporting so that our students, regardless of their childcare, regardless of their ESL, because sometimes they're childcare, but they're in ESL, regardless of which department they're on, that we are supporting them to complete, whether it's the CDA 1-year AAS or the AAT. And so that is it for my presentation. If there's any questions.
Well, we're actually going to need to ask that you maybe can address some of the questions in the chat. There's a number of really great questions there, but we would like to transition now to Dr. Deborah Young of the Pomoja Project in Colorado to hear another approach to supporting a similar population. Deborah?
Great. Thank you everyone for inviting us here today. And this is very exciting. So we come from a different lens. So I did work in higher education for 25 years, was chair of our early childhood department. And now I'm leading a community-based non-governmental organization, and we're called Empowering Communities Globally. And in 2019, our state with the preschool development grant was doing some data collection across the state. And I had asked the executive director, how many refugee voices did you have in there? And they replied that they can access the survey and all this stuff online, and it's in Spanish and English. And I said, so you're telling me zero? And she's like, what do you mean? And so we collaborated, and within 10 days, we had 4 groups of refugees pulled together for listening sessions in person. And that's how it all started, is their voice was brought to the state. Next slide, please. And so that was the beginning of this 5-step model. That was the community. We started to bring the community together, and it didn't just stop for them to give their voice to what was going to happen in early childhood. They wanted to be an active participant. So our first group was a group of about 25 women from Afghanistan. And they were like, we want to enter the workforce. We want to work in early childhood. It aligns with our culture. It aligns with our religion. It aligns what we want to do with families. How do we get there? And so from there, we started to work with the community colleges. That's that participation. We brought them to the colleges and find a community college who was going to work with us and see what we can do to offer them classes, the education piece. And what we do is we try to hold those JEDI principles, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusivity, together. So what do we need to have success for 25 Afghan women to be successful in college? Language is the huge barrier. Navigation is a huge barrier. What does it mean to apply for a college? Register for classes, apply to FAFSA. What's your visa status? You can imagine that navigation coming from rural Afghanistan, never going to formal school. Wow, what could that be? So that's the part where we all started to work together, and both Empowering Communities Globally and Lutheran Family Services has continued to work together on this. And these are our basic principles: cultural humility. You know, I might be an expert in higher education in the US, but they're an expert in being a refugee in the US. And so it's only with that collaboration and actual have that power of, the equity and power in decision making, can we truly be successful. Cultural bridging, we believe, is both ways, not just one way. And so it's really important for us to meet and go over, and us to meet and be on this bridge and build it together. So do no harm, cultural humility, equity, and inclusion. And we use a participatory action research framework or approach that the women are actually collecting data on what they believe is important to help them inform the next cohort. We do work in cohort-based models. Retention and learning communities seems to really help the learning as well as the retention. We believe that everyone entering has strengths and assets, and we help identify those. As you can imagine, coming over as a refugee, many times it's hard to recognize what you have because you've been beat up by system after system after system. How do you start looking at that again? And really our basis is forming amazing relationships. And that's why I love this work. And we have an attitude of failing forward. There's not a lot of pathways that are already out there doing this. So as we're learning, it's okay if we make a mistake, and how do we move forward? Again, fundamental community building, trusting relationships. It's so huge. And then, wow, where's the resources? Well, I've had to go to Canada and I've had to go to Australia to find resources in Arabic and Farsi and Dari and Korean and Chin and all these languages that we're working with. So we also have to build on partnerships because we also believe in sustainability. So in the colleges that we work with, we offer our classes in first languages. So I teach 8 classes a semester at the moment, and some of my classes have 6 languages in it at the same time. They're all taking, or almost all, those who want to and need it, are taking ESL credit classes at the same time. So it's not that English equals intelligence. It's that English is necessary and it's going to take some time. But why wait when you also bring this immense intelligence to the table and this talent to our state? We don't want to lose that. So how do we move both of them at the same time? We've worked in an apprenticeship program. However, it depends who you're working with and how they're viewing things. And so we've had a little bumps on those roads. And now we have a group of centers who are willing to take refugees and immigrants and learn what we call CLI practices, cultural, linguistic, and inclusive practices in their center to support the women learning and practicing. So when they are working in their home, they feel confident. And so we have about 8 schools now that are lab schools. We work with county workforce, we work with community colleges, and because we're opening a new department of early childhood in Colorado, we are working with the state hand in hand. At first, we got to meet in person, and then we had to go to live virtual. We also have mentors. It's not just the refugees, right? It's the mindset of a state or the mindset of communities. So our mentors come from the community who want to learn more about refugees and immigrants. And so they meet them 1.5 hours a week in learning communities, and they're sharing stories back and forth. It's not just focused on content. Again, it's focused on relationship and understanding. What is it to live in the US? What was it to live in Afghanistan or Syria or Lebanon or Libya or Myanmar? And also we have a coaching where a lot of emerging early childhood professionals are coming from the refugee and immigrant communities, and we're providing a pathway to coaching. So now they're coaching the people who are coming from those countries. So our general recommendations are really having these initial conversations about systemic barriers with the refugees and immigrants, and then having them have the conversations with the colleges, the states, the businesses. So their voices and they're learning how to represent themselves as well. And not by themselves. Again, it's a cultural bridge. I just want to tell one story is when I was in a meeting, at a state meeting, they're sitting around, and I brought one of the women from Afghanistan with me, and one of the state people who were heading this meeting said, well, we only need professionals to actually make this decision. And I said, I am so glad you said that, because how many have a professional degree in refugee? We happen to bring one with us, right? And so really changing that mindset of what is a professional? What is a credential? What does this mean? And how do we expand our implicit bias in this country of what that is? Navigators, huge, as you know, Dr. Sonia was saying, the navigation in this process is huge. To just learn about the system and the immense systemic barriers that exist. If you have not been brought up in the US, understand how the US works, all those hidden agendas, and speak English. Those are just, and then interpreters. We need interpreters within our educational systems as just part of our daily lives. How do we have that? You know, using the Google Translate is not enough. If we're really a multicultural, multilingual country, then let's be one. Cohort model, absolutely key. They are socially isolated when they come to the Colorado and most states. And so this brings other people who speak common languages, share common contextual context and historical life's journeys. And so they are actually the support systems for each other and are making that social network, which we know is a huge protective factor. And then the willingness for professors to use interpreters, to be like, it's okay to fumble. It's okay not to look like you're 100% control all the time. Cultural bumps are part of cultural bridging. So really getting people in those finance office, registrar's office, adjunct and full-time faculty, chairs, all on board that this is something that we truly want to work towards, because everybody benefits. Every single person, all English, white people benefit so highly from diversifying, right? It's like we have a lot more to learn than actually the refugees and immigrants who are coming in. So it's really a process, and I'm just really thrilled to be a part of the process. We have 120 people. Our grant was for 30. We've opened about 8 new FFMs in the last 2 months. It took a long time to do that, to build trust, because most of the FFNs were so afraid to even come forward because of the state. They just don't understand how the state systems. We're finding children with disabilities, all kinds of things out there that people are afraid to mention because they're afraid to get their children taken away. So we're trying to break down barriers, and we have the political will in our state at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. All 3 of you, Tiffany, Dr. Sonia, Dr. Deborah. If we have just a couple of minutes, if there are questions for Deborah, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will be collecting these questions, filtering through, putting the answers that were in the chat, and then following up with our speakers to get any that aren't answered. So if there's anything that struck you as new, surprising, or exciting, please let us know. And that'll take us at this point actually to the close of our meeting today. We promised you a jam-packed informational meeting. The contacts and resources will be shared out. They'll be sent as an email later this week to everyone who's here. We have 2 additional webinars coming up. We have a special event partnering with P5 fiscal strategies on cost modeling and HBCC, and really digging into how that is also an equity issue as we're looking at funding and financing and the true cost of care. And so then we'll also be having the 3rd part of this series on April 19th, which is business supports for home-based childcare educators whose primary language is other than English. We are going to pop those 2 registration links into the chat, but they will also be included in the resources and PowerPoint that you get. As you leave today, we have a new survey system, and it is going to pop up. So if you can stay just a minute, it will pop up and your answers are anonymous. And we so appreciate all of you in attendance, your questions, and your dedication to all of the children and families that you serve. Thank you, everyone.